My sister-in-law, Erin, is a social butterfly. She's never met a stranger, and she's always loved long conversations, lots of laughing, and she is the funnest person to have a sleepover with. So it's no surprise when I tell you, when she was young, she loved spending the night at her best friend's. We'll call her Shauna. They only lived around the curve from each other up in the valley, so you would find them together most nights during the summer at one or the other's house, and I guess you'd say they were inseparable. Shauna lived in an older white house that was positioned below the main road, down the embankment, and it sat between what they used to call a pole barn and on the other side, a field of corn stalks. She lived there with her mother and father and siblings. Erin spent many days and many nights there, and they always had fun, watching movies, making prank calls, and just hanging around. One particular evening, they'd set their plan in motion, sleep over at Shauna's. They'd already spent the day riding bikes up and down the holler until almost dark, then sat down to a big supper with Shauna's family, followed by a dance party in Shauna's room. There had been some small renovations going on, and the bunk beds her dad had bought were not finished being put together, so as it approached the wee hours of the morning, around 2 a.m., they decided to lay down. And instead of sleeping in Shauna's bedroom, they opted for the pull-out couch in the living room. It was positioned against the wall, facing a set of sliding glass doors at the front of the house. The blinds were pulled back for a clear view of the landscape, and it made for an amazing presentation during a storm. And that night, boy, did it storm. The thunder had grumbled all day and evening, threatening rain, and as they fell asleep, it kept its promise. The rain poured down in tremendous sheets, and the lightning took few breaks as it kept up with the thunder. For an hour it roared, then as quickly as it started, it stopped, leaving only the sound of the remaining drops falling from the tree above the house onto the roof of the porch. It was around 3 a.m. when Erin woke from a dead sleep. She squinted her eyes and tried to get her bearings, and realized what had woken her was Shauna's hand gently squeezing her shoulder. She looked over, and there she sat, straight up in bed, staring quietly out of the sliding glass doors. Erin sat up and tried to adjust her eyes in the dark room. She looked towards the doors, and it was then that she saw what Shauna was staring at. The street light stood at the beginning of the overgrown rows to the cornfield, to the right of her view, probably 20-odd feet away, and under that light stood a man. He was still, and his clothes were dark, and he looked every inch of 8 feet tall, unusually tall and slim. Just the mere sight of a stranger in the dark was enough, but it was something else that caused their blood to run ice cold. He was facing the house, arms to his side, no movement, with the biggest smile that ran what looked like from one ear all the way to the other. An exaggerated toothy grin that was startling even at that distance away. And to make it worse, he was staring directly into the sliding glass doors. The street light was on full brightness, casting a glare onto the house, so it seemed impossible from where he stood that he could see them. But he could see them. They could feel it. Had he been standing there the entire time that they slept? Erin scrambled out of the bed and whispered, "Shauna, get your dad." Shauna looked in shock, but she slowly slid her feet to the floor, and then, with a deafening screech, called to her father. The whole house immediately went to action. The other kids ran through the hallways, and her dad and mom came barreling out of their room. Shauna, in a panic, pointing at the doors and blurting out what she'd seen. All the while, Erin kept her eye on the man who had seemingly watched the entire time. He was standing as still as a stone, with that big, unrealistic grin, eyes focused intently toward the house. Then, in no rush, he turned, still smiling, and walked into the corn and disappeared. By the time her dad grabbed his shotgun and ran out into the yard without hesitation, barefoot, into the wet, soggy ground of the driveway, he swung his weapon wildly and threatened. But there was nothing. He was gone. Aaron stood in the doorway and directed him to look towards the corn, but no one was ever found. They didn't sleep the rest of that night, and they did call the authorities, but they didn't find anything. The man was gone, if it was a man at all. Aaron and Shauna remained friends till this very day, and they continued to have their sleepovers. But they never slept in the living room again, and the blinds were always closed. Some nights, after a storm, when the rain stops and all that's left are the drips from the trees, they wonder if the tall man is standing somewhere, arms at his side, smiling. Thank you for listening. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so now. Hit the like button and sleep well.